declaring Islam along with his brother, and they both became Muslims to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And here's how it goes. Amr says, وَخَلَّيَا بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ الصَّدَقَةِ. They acknowledged charity. He did not leave Oman until they acknowledged that they cannot take part of the religion, or 7 parts, or 9 out of 10 parts, and leave one part out. You either take this whole religion together, or you don't. It's not a pick and choose type of thing. And he said, I did not leave until they acknowledge that they will pay charity and will pay zakah to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So that was the last message that we go over. And there was more messages that went to different kings, but these are the ones that are mostly documented in our Islamic history. We see the message is the same. The text of the message differs very slightly from one culture to the other, just depending on where it's going. But the basic message is exactly the same. And it's short. Each message we saw, it's very few lines. Now, the response to that was either very severe, from taking this letter and tore it apart and send people to arrest Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like Kisra did, or to go down from your throne, kiss the letter, put it on your eyes, and declare Islam in front of everybody, like Najashi did. And there are many ways in the middle, like the spectrum goes, like the human being. Some of them did not respond one way or the other, like Al-Muqawqis. So Islam message was the same. It's how people received it. And this is what happens with da'wah all along till today. You give the message out. And this is an example that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches us how to call for Islam. You give the message the way it is, and don't compromise. This is Islam. Somebody says, well, I'll take Islam except Allah continue to drink. Well, that's not Islam. You have to follow Islam. You have to do at least the 5 pillars. I mean, this is no Islam without fasting. There's no Islam without zakah. There's no Islam without salah. That you have to follow this. And this is the message. And those who accept it, then they have the guidance. And those who reject, then they have their own responsibility in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had some debt. He had a shield that was pawned with a Jewish person. And so he didn't have money that he didn't owe anybody money, but his shield was pawned. That means when you pawn something, you don't have to pay it back. Then that other person can just keep the shield and that's it. It's not exactly a debt. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, but if he had inherited all that property, how come he is...
Well, that property was still there. I mean, the land itself, the land of Fadak is still there. And it brings money every year. Now, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whenever he gets money, I mean, it doesn't even stay in that house for long. It just immediately goes out to the rest of the Muslim ummah. But after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam died, then they started bringing that money from Fadak. And then the Fatima decided, well, that money is part of what comes to Rasulullah, then they should be, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to distribute it, they should be the one to have it or decide what to do with it. Abu Bakr said, no, that should go back now to the treasury. That should go back to the government of Islam, not to the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So on the surface there may be some not well understanding of how come he was so rich and how come he was so poor when he died, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Anything that would be brought to him, it would go. It would just go immediately. I mean, we know when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam slaughters anything in his house, that night there is nothing in his house. He gives it all to the poor or to his companions or friends, etc. So, but the land is there. The land of Fadak, every year it comes with the harvest. And every year the harvest come where? To Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then he distributed. So after his death, the first harvest that would come, now what to do with that? That's what the conflict was about. There is nothing narrated about Aisha, and Aisha would not have a conflict with her father about that. You know, Abu Bakr is her father. So he was the ruler, and the conflict was between Ali and Abu Bakr. Yeah. Actually, Right. Actually, this was also, I don't know if you were here with Dr. Kaltner was here in the last open house. He addressed that particular, he was talking about myths and facts about Islam. And one of the myths that Islam was spread by the sword. And the reason people say that Muslims would go into a new country or a new city and they surround it and besiege it, and they said, you have to become a Muslim and otherwise we will fight you. And he said, no. The third option, the paying the tax of protection, which was about as much as zakah or less. I mean, Muslims pay that anyway in charity, and the ones that did not want to accept Islam will have to accept the authority of Muslims, but they do not have to accept the religion of Islam. And that's where the hair splitting is those who are still in the Middle East that were Christians and have been Christians since the days of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and continue to be, they were never forced to become Muslims. But yes, they were obligated to accept the authority of Islam for one good reason, is without accepting that authority, the non-Muslim authority would not let the people of that particular place or city or settlement accept Islam. They would force them not to become Muslims, and they would not allow Muslims to spread the word of God into that city. So it was an obligation, and it still is an obligation on Muslims whenever you cannot spread the word of God. Like if you are not allowed to call for Islam in a place, then if there is a Muslim authority, then it is an obligation on that Muslim authority to make sure that that happens, that people have freedom to follow the word of God. But what would happen, let's say in the Roman Empire, in a city like Damascus that Muslims conquered, that the Caesar would not allow anybody to accept Islam. If you accept Islam, you die. So Muslims' obligation was to lift that tyrant, that transgressor authority from the people, replace it with a more acceptable, with more tolerant authority, which is the authority of Islam, that would allow people to keep their own religion. And based on that tolerance, all they need to do is to pay a small tax for their protection. They will be protected to practice whatever religion they choose by the Muslims and be defended by the Muslims' army. And that is nothing but tolerance. And I don't see how anybody can understand these conditions and still say that Islam was forced upon the conquered land, was forced upon the new territories that was conquered after Islam. Yes?
Yeah, another thing that that shows that side of it, that there's so much the Muslims trusted them,
Right.
that they let them fight in their army, 75% of them.
And I mean the massacres that the Crusaders committed against Orthodox Christians in the Holy Land is very well documented. The massacres that they committed against the Byzantines, the Eastern Church, in what is known now as Turkey, on their way down to the Holy Land, and then in Palestine and in Syria, in Antioch. I mean, it's well known and very well documented, where the Eastern Church would call upon the Muslim rulers to come and defend them the way they did before. They want to continue to pay jizya, and they wanted Muslim armies to come and save them from the Christian brethren, from the Crusaders that were slaughtering them. I mean, the streets of Jerusalem, and it's very well documented, that were filled with blood from the days of the Crusades.
Native blood, the same history.
Exactly. That was playing actually when I first started the session, is a film about that.
Look at Spanish Inquisition,
Right.
The massacre, the recent history.
And those who argue that, I mean, if Islam is to spread by the sword, then how come? How come for 800 years Christianity survived in Spain? I mean, it wasn't 10 or 15 or 800 years. I mean, 100 years is enough to basically 3 generations that you can raise. For 800 years you had almost 25 generations of people that you're raising under Islamic rule. If you are to force any ideas on them, you could.
أشرف الأعراب والأعجم خير من يمشي على قدمه